Okay, after doing the artillery fire, and one of the problems is, this exemplifies it, disordered or badly shaken in this case, artillery have a hard time recovering. They've got to find themselves some infantry to recover. They can't be back on the ridge or whatever conducting long-range fire and recover from their shaken status. Makes sense if you're facing the enemy and there's infantry, within range of you. But artillery should be able to recover and reorganize, when they're just providing a bombardment role without having an infantry stationed, a whole part of a brigade stationed with them as some sort of garrison or something to make sure that they rally. We are seeing a little bit of effect from the artillery as the guns get closer. These Union guns coming close here. Knocked up Taliaferro a little bit. Cav swung over here to help protect Crawford. If you think that my little scenario in the ditch is unlikely, well, this ditch is quite large, and there's actually another one here where there's a little outcropping, and this one actually had an effect on play. I believe there was a gun, an artillery piece, this one probably, that was hiding behind there. Now up here, he can shoot over his own units. For all the grousing about that, though, the concept of trying to work the obscuring terrain features that don't fully block, I think that's really a clever move. So for example, having to angle your fire, which you have to do anyway, but having to account for the danger of hitting your own troops, making that an obscuring fire all the time. Firing through woods, I'm a little less iffy about. The cornfield, nobody cares about the cornfield if they have an actual line of sight. But it does, and it does highlight some things that you don't often see. A lot of games don't allow you to shoot over your own units, even with artillery, and it allows you to see why being up on the hill is not necessarily that good an idea until the opponent actually gets there. Of course, not every commander is Wellington. Not every commander can bring his troops behind the crest of the ridge until he absolutely needs them to just jump up. Alrighty. The command control rules rolling for things with the chits that can prevent things from happening. Command confusion in this case. Very little has happened. A lot of chits got drawn. May not be so apparent here, but a lot of them are in here. Fewer away. And a couple activations that the chits are still in there. And basically nothing happened. The only thing that's happened is Thomas came on the board here successfully. And we're pushing him over to the flank here. I'd like to kind of, for some kind of probably OCD related command coherence, I'd like to keep all of Ewell's forces kind of connected, but that seems to be a poor choice, and there's a bit of a threat here on this artillery here, so I'm kind of angling Thomas to cover that. That's territory Ewell would have been covering, but I needed him to slide over. I figured, well, I could send Thomas this way, but I think Ronald will be enough that way, and with an actual activation I was able to push forward far enough. I caught myself doing this last turn, or I caught myself now doing it and realized I did it last turn. The brigade reserve movement, you got to play it immediately. I would have done so, but since I cheated last turn, I'm going to throw it into the Go Find Pope. Forgot to mention something last time. Gordon made a charge against Taliaferro here and got driven back, and then up here, Green attempted to attack the artillery. A lot of successes on the Union rolls for activation, but not really getting a good hook here. This was pretty unlikely to get driven back here, attacking the artillery up a hill. This was up a hill too. It was iffy. The artillery got a huge roll, trashed one of Green's units, sent the other falling back pretty hard. The one that got trashed is the one that kept going. We got 2 depletions over here, and then I think the morale hit retreat, and that's what sent him here. The morale hit retreat 2 without a panic, and then in the actual fight, it was a close fight. Another depletion on the unit that was attacking, which is this guy, and he ended up on his break test failing it, so I don't really have to worry about what his skedaddle result was. With a lot of the event chits and such out of the deck, a number of we're beginning to see maybe a greater pace of real activation. So Prince went, and he got a 6. Plus, I'm getting good die rolls. He got a successful activation, and he's actually charging forward. Now, he would have had a useful use for a recovery operation. Could have recovered this unit, this, and I think that's a Gary over here. No, Crawford over here. And you can't pull him in. He's not far enough over in the box. But he could have done a couple of recovery or a defense just to rally this. You'll notice the skirmishers are no longer in skirmish order. I paid the movement point cost to convert them over, because I'm launching an attack down the center of the Union line. Gordon here is going to try to hit to the flank, and we're just going to try to bust our way through it. That actually caused a problem because Talafiero is weakened. A lot of his units are on their weakened side, battle-weary side, and he wanted to do a recovery operation. He was far enough away from everybody because the Crawford's units had pulled back, but now this charge put him into a position where a lot of his units couldn't, so I pulled back a little bit with a defend order. I was able to rally a morale hit, but I can't really recover the unit. Banks was the last chit in the cup. I used him to actually do a full rally on Prince. I brought him back up to snuff as a full unit. All worked out very well because I left my units in the back. By the way, this system really, it doesn't encourage the use of reserves as, okay, it does, but in the normal manner, which means most players probably won't follow it for a tactical game. But it encourages the use of reserves in particular in terms of recovery objects. In fact, I'm feeling like it encourages it more than, say, CWB, and I'm not sure why, but maybe all the mechanical aspects of trying to recover units in CWB and not being sure you're going to. Here, if you've got your units in the back area and they make their command roll, they recover, you know? And that's a lot more appealing than, yeah, we might end up better off. But, you know, in CWB, usually things that are recovering aren't really ineffectual. Here, maybe things get a little too ineffectual, although not really. But it's so obvious how weak they are and how easily you can improve them. And in most games, I think most players are a little bit more willing to throw everything on the line than perhaps they should be. I think the games actually tend to reward that more than they do carefully husbanding your resources and using them at the right moment. This doesn't handle, say, the morale effects of a bunch of units from reserve, fresh units coming in and throwing their way into the battle. And I don't know many systems for the Civil War. I don't know any. I know some in other eras, I think, that really cover that. Hey, look, there's a bunch of fresh stuff hitting them. They're going, and, you know, our morale just surges forward because of that. Just the morale of the local troops seeing and their own fighting capacity. Just like many games have this sort of dominoes effect of the morale decreasing. Well, the reality is, from what I understand, or at least my model would be, to try to include that in a positive way too. If fresh troops hit into a fight that you're already fighting in, not only does the enemy become discouraged, but your allied local forces become enheartened seeing your attack. Anyway, we got a little bit of cleanup to do here. Victory points, still the Union's pumping out 4 a turn, which the Confederates had better do something about real fast. And get another available unit. And the important thing is Jackson and Ricketts here. Let's take a look. I got 3. That's turn 5. We're getting close. 9 minus 3. No, that's not going to do it. And Ricketts also has 3 on turn 5. And that will work. We can push him forward 1. Alright. And we do the event chits and bump this forward. Alrighty. Artillery fire is having a little bit more than the nuisance effect it normally would. A little bit of retreating here, but it's at the point where the Union's about ready to hit there, and Prince actually had a unit thrown back and badly damaged. Beginning to shift all the Union artillery over to this ridge line to support the oblique attack. It's so far away here that it's not going to do much and where it was. So by putting it in a protected but still important position in terms of the elevations, I can actually engage probably some of the Confederate units with better results than I would from back here where I'm just plinking on this table, and maybe I get a limited morale check, but that's about it. Alright, the Cav. Did I want to do anything with the Cav? I think he's fine where he is. And other than that, I guess we move on to the chit pulls. What's kind of weird here is the chit draw phase and the brigade activation phase. This is one thing. It shouldn't be represented the way it is, and it is in both the rules and in the graphics, and that can be kind of confusing when you first look over the game. It's tough for the Confederates in a way that I'm not used to these systems being terribly tough. Because of the defensive fire, etc., and the difficulty in getting units to move. It didn't happen. I pulled early, or Ewell, and I chose not to move early. I moved Forno. But honestly, the Union can sit out here with their rifles, which have a range 2, and face the smoothbore muskets. And it's going to take the Confederates some time to actually charge forward and hit. Now, they took the rebel yell and made sure that chit's in the cup. So unless the fortunes of war cancels it out, they'll at least have something to force them to charge forward. But the Union, with its preponderance of rifle infantry, can stand at distance and fire. Now that happens in the other games. So Great Battles of the American Civil War, it happens in, and I think probably the RSS LOB stuff, I don't really recall the firing range being a major factor, maybe because I wasn't paying much attention in that, where one person will stand at distance and fire, but then the other person pretty much has the opportunity to move forward, engage a little closer, and then it stays there. And that would happen here, but I need the command. I don't have that, okay, look, he's right on me. He's right at the distance I can't shoot back at. I've got to move forward. You don't have that ability to be able to do what you got to do. A bunch of chits taking effect here. For example, the Union pulling Geary up with a reserve movement. Crawford here got hit with command indecision and was unable to recover the way he wanted to. The Confederates have used some of their activations to recover the units that were weakened back here. So the next thing was a rebel yell, and early charged forward to hit Prince's units. Took fire from both these hexes, which retreated the 2 units that were the biggest involved in the fight. But this other guy here managed to actually plow into a bigger unit and get a lucky shot and take it out, in part because of the shifts from the Rebel Yell. So he shook things up a little bit, but not much. He managed to launch a full all-out charge along the line here, because Prince can just stand there and fire at him. We have almost nothing that can fire. In doing so, we ended up knocking one unit into the broken box. We got kind of lucky on the initial fire going in. We got kind of unlucky pounding into this hex, where one unit got retreated. I think 2 units got retreated actually from both fire and then from the attack itself. I'm not sure. No, we were pounding into this hex, but it was a particularly big unit that got damaged. This thing was like a 6.5. And with the smoothbore advantage and everything, we were way up on the high chart. We ended up rolling an 11 on the attack, which never hits. But hit isn't the thing here. It ends up close fight. We got depleted, and it was pretty bad. There's a very interesting level of randomness in this game, and probably heavier than in most of these. So when you enter close combat in a lot of games, CWB for example, especially, but even in the great battle, the old great battles of the American Civil War, I haven't tried the new ones yet. There's a great deal of variance in when you do close combat, but when you do fire combat, it's generally a very slow process of wearing the enemy down. One die roll doesn't mean much. Here, actually, generally you don't do anything, but one die roll can mean a lot. It can drive someone off the line or whatever all at once. It's fine. That's possible in the other game. It's just the randomness is a little heavier here. And then in the close combat, it ends up very, very variable. Just as a matter of, hey, if you don't get the right, if you're not able to hit the right color band, if you're not, you've got a lot of different numbers in that distribution, a lot of different options of what can happen, and there's no smoothing of it. The chart is pretty much a straight chart. A couple of die rolls out of the 36 options in each category. So you see the same kind of effects you would get off a single die roll CRT, for example, where it's an even distribution. So that's, but spread out more, which always pleases me a little bit. And as we finish up turn 6, we'll get to those later. Crawford rallied. I used the CIC chit to move Gordon forward. I would have, and to do a defend order, which he moved forward, and I don't know if he's allowed to, actually. Maybe cheating. No. You're allowed to move a couple movement points. You can't engage. Oh no, you can engage with defend. Okay. Good enough. Anyway, I did a defend order to give me some of the rally capability of that. I just wasn't sure you could move closer to the enemy, but you can even engage. And I would have used that on Crawford if he had failed to get his rally, because I really need some attack from this angle. Jackson's getting closer and closer to coming in. Ricketts just missed getting underway. And we got more units to recover here for Prince and Green. Those count as victory points against the Union if, at game's end if they don't do anything. And we give them 4 more points. That's getting to be a pretty big amount to recover from, but presumably the Confederates can get most of the points that they are due to get at the end of the game. Brings into question kind of what the game is about, right? Because so I'm trying to figure out how to express this, but if Banks's attack had been sufficiently brutal to force the Confederates to retreat early, How much does that really do? Well, not much strategically, to tell you the truth. But that was his goal, I guess, was to hurt the Confederates enough early on that they just drive them away and get them retreating, and the rest of the fresh army pursues them. I guess. It's hard to justify his actions, but because he's taking a risk for very little gain. If the Confederates manage to stay here and hold this terrain, it has, again, very little effect strategically, because they're going to have to withdraw anyway. And they're going to be facing Pope's army, which is fairly fresh anyway. There's not much they can really do here. So it's kind of this weird, strategically none of this makes any sense. Tactically, does any of it make sense? Well, I don't know. I mean, Banks's glory, how hard did he hit them? How long could he keep them away from the victory point hexes? That's what it kind of comes down to. It's a tough battle to try to score in any sense of the word, because the strategic situation is pretty much fixed, and Banks's rationale for this attack is really hard to judge, And another ineffectual artillery fire phase. I don't think we got much. This guy might have taken a hit from it. The Union guns, they're having trouble because of the line of sight rolls. So for example, here, where I should be able to see, probably because the hill rises above this, but this is the same height, so it blocks. This guy actually probably got shot illegally. If he's the one who got shot, I don't really recall. No, this guy was the one who was getting shot at illegally. I fired up the hill to here. Now he's right before a depression, so he'd be beyond the crest of the hill. So in the CWB system, he would not be able to be hit. In the great battles of American Civil War, the way they handle line of sight, he would be able to be hit because everything's kind of considered to be kind of like cakes, layer cakes. Okay, let's see. We had a number of activations here. Branch moving forward under Hill, Thomas sliding over here, Early pushing his way back towards his command. Remember, I have a kind of enjoyment of doing that. He took a defend order so he could, at least rally some of his troops. The rest, though, he's got to give a full rally order to, which is going to be tougher to do, especially if the Union keeps pushing in this direction. I'm not sure if we can do rally yet. I'm having a hard time playing as much as I used to. I don't know quite why. Yeah, at least 3 hexes away, so I'm okay. At one point I thought it might be more than 3 and said, I don't want to check that. But now we got an interesting fog of war event, though, which was possible Union general casualty. We get augur. There's no possible to it. If the guy's on the field, he's wounded. And now I got to hunt augur down out of the cup because he's in here somewhere. And he gets replaced with his replacement chit, which is a weaker valued chit. Now, if he gets wounded again, either he came back or a more effective leader replaced the ineffective first replacement. And we're back to his regular chit again, which I think is an interesting way of doing things. At least in terms of, being parsimonious about the chits themselves. But I almost feel like, once you're wounded, you're probably not going to be that effective. But it could be just a minor wound that he could come back from and be effective once again. So, who knows? All right, a little bit of... No, not a hell of a lot going on. There were firefight chit got played with little effect, but the biggie was this rebel yell. Basically, Ronald moved into position, and then the Confederates said, hey, I'm set up for it. Made a charge with a rebel yell. Now, what was kind of weird about it is I was way over the chart. in terms of the total value. I ended up on the final chart. Probably didn't need the Rebel Yell modifier, although it helped me in going uphill, I guess. Although I still don't think I needed it because I had outnumbering and everything else. And I destroyed, after taking some fire, and I mean, there wasn't a lot other than Crawford's own unit. I destroyed Crawford's unit and took the victory point hex. So that's going to help stop the bleeding in terms of victory points that the Union's been imposing on me. Sometimes the event chips don't really help you. I fired one off on Prince, and he ended up getting a defend action, which may not have been what he'd take, but it's probably pretty close to it. And with a wounded augur, actually improved his chances maybe of getting the command I was trying to get, or a command that I was happy with. If he had failed his roll, he would just be in a no orders situation and have to roll the shots. So sometimes maybe it's just not even worth playing those suckers. Taliaferro moving up, positioning himself possibly for another Rebel Yell there to strike on Gordon's units here. I got one sitting here. Apparently 2 in the deck, and I don't know how much else has happened actually. This one kind of intensely over here. Taliaferro launched an advance, but then he did the Rebel Yell. Kind of got broken up and pushed back, and then Gordon's units were able to charge forward and manage close combats, and actually got the confident shit to work for them, in that this big unit smashed into a unit here, drove it back, depleted both units actually, which isn't terribly easy to do. Hit it, but we were at 3-1 with all the strength here. Hit it again here, again at 3-1 because the units were now reduced, or 5-1 actually. And less strength points, only 10 base, but you know, that starts sending us over into the big numbers anyway. And smashed both of them into the broken box. The Union still has one last play left with Banks. Okay, so Crawford came back and struck down here. Did a melee attack and partially successfully drove the lead unit away. But the big thing is they took the victory point hex, which means the Union's going to get 4 points again this turn. The Confederates managed to get Jackson in play though. He finally came up, and that just means they're going to get that commander marker. That's pretty valuable. Banks was how the Union managed to push forward with a guaranteed command. Now Jackson is going to be able to create guaranteed commands where he needs them, and potentially when he needs them. And you know, we're about halfway through the battle, and the Union's collecting up points for these guys over here. If they can kind of hold on to their line, it's going to be a tough call with these guys. Also, now that Jackson's in, Trimble and Forno are available. So there's a lot more Confederate forces coming into play here. And the Union's not really crapped out, but probably can't hold out much longer. Crawford took a hit from one of these guys, came up to support the assault. Common problem as I move into turn 8 here. Made my picks with the line of sight that I'm trying to figure out for the artillery, where it's the most important, because normally the infantry, you know, is only firing at range 2 at most. Well, actually, the rifled muskets can fire out at range 3. I don't think I've done that, but there's the issue of one feature blocking a line of sight and then something else blocking the line of sight that is itself blocked. This goes way back to Terrible Swift Sword days for me, where this happens. Now, that was a game that was so obnoxious because a line of infantry, you could have a set of woods, and a line of infantry behind the woods could all be invisible. Because although the woods only blocked to the 1st infantry, the second one was blocked by the 1st infantry, the third one by the 2nd, etc. depending on the elevations, etc. But that kind of situation could come. Let me show you an example that's here. This guy wants to fire, say, at Thomas here. Now, when I trace this line of sight, it intersects this a little bit, I believe. It's basically, I don't know, the division would be here. We're cutting down. But if I wanted to hit the 35th Georgia down here, that line of sight I don't think does intersect. We could see, yeah, it does not intersect hex 1912 here, which is the danger hex. But this unit, which is blocked by 1912, is blocking this unit. And those are always what I consider sort of pathological line of sight problems. Where, look, I got to be able to shoot something there. And I think with this game, what you've got to do in a lot of cases, and with a number of these systems, is just say, look, screw it, you know. Some level reason has to apply. So either this unit or this unit can be hit. Somebody gets to choose. I don't care who. Maybe the guy who is defending, but one of them is going to be seen. Now, I think it's ludicrous to say that this guy's seen, so I'm going to allow a line of sight to that unit because it is blocking the line of sight to this unit. This turns are broken up into smaller bites by the chit pull system. I also have to kind of break the videos up because there's no overwhelming narrative that comes forth to me. When I take an I go, you go turn, I can actually perhaps take a few turns in a row and report on what's going on. Something I did back when I did the 7 days stuff by the gamers down there. I don't know if you can see it, the light's very bad. But with this, I feel like I have to come back after every couple chit pulls because what happens is very much more opportunistic. You could have broad strategic goals. For example, Forno is trying to swing around this way, Trimble around this way. It also may have to do with how close the battle is, you know, how closely aligned it is. There aren't broad movements. This is, you know, a many map monstrosity. But anyway, what's happened in the last couple activations that's of importance is Crawford managed close assault down here. Now, closest combat is unlikely to take more than one unit out of the action. It can happen. If you get good results, you can get these panic results and drive more than one unit away. But even at the best results, the severe level, you still only have a 50-50 chance of driving a second unit off the board. And it's also unlikely to hit a second unit. You have to get the D2 for that. It is possible for really high rolls to get you to the severe level, though, or to the all severe, which just means every unit has to make its own roll. And that'll pretty much break anything up. But if you don't hit onto those levels, you're probably not going to gain ground against a bunch of small units, but one cohesive unit might break. I'm not sure I believe what's being represented there, because to me, a couple of smaller commands, even if one breaks, yeah, there's some level of, oh, well, we're standing. But honestly, a cohesive unit is probably more likely to hold together. And here we have some high morale little units. And if you stacked in the same area, none of them are, you know, you're not going to be able to break the whole set very easily. On the other hand, and in fact, the highest morale unit kind of protects the rest, which does make sense. I had something else to say, but I don't remember what. And then, as you can see, Forno is beginning to sweep down. The armies are getting a little battered. I had an activation, or no, I had a chit pull for the Rebel Yell that I didn't want to use because I got to get Ronald out of there and maybe get Garnett back in the line. A lot of swapping damaged units in and out. I didn't feel like that was happening in the SPI Cedar Mountain. I kind of like that. I do feel that that happens to some extent in the CWB games,
But here there seems to be a denseness of the forces where you have kind of more than can cover the ground available, which also helps make things stay in reserve rather than just kind of run away.
Winder's division suffered some significant problems at the beginning. So first Crawford started the attack. Ronald followed up by taking a defend action, kind of pulling back a little bit, leaving one healthy unit in place, doing a little rallying and preparing themselves for the big reform action. We got a couple more draws right in a way. Garnett got a command confusion plate on him, wasn't able to move. And then Teleferro got a Confederate fatigue plate on him, and he took a hit over here. It's a reduced unit now. And he also failed to get an activation, essentially, so all he could do was a little bit of fire back on Gordon here with weakened units. So that whole command is sort of disintegrating right now, except that Garnett is in good shape, but isn't doing the job that he was expected to do. I pulled Ronald out with the expectation Garnett would be able to flood in there. We got both banks, so if Garnett hadn't gone yet, it might have been a time to trigger banks. I don't know if maybe Jackson wants to make a trigger to see if he can push Garnett in there. It probably is the best thing I can do is to defend this flank because it's collapsing. I'm not sure what happens if both players want to play their CIC at the same time, or if they both want to play a chit at the same time. I'll have to look to see if there's something controlling that. It's very carefully and specifically laid out. The Union has to declare first whether he's using a chit, then the Confederate gets to declare. If both players are, the Confederate gets to choose who gets to play a chit. So I think Jackson is going to get a chance to use his activation here. And the Union used up all of its special powers. Some of them can't be played. I think like command confusion cannot be used against the CIC. I'm not sure though. The Confederates finally get their special ability, Jackson's Rusty Sword. This is pretty impressive actually. I can play it because Jackson's in play now. This is why I haven't been able to play it before. And I pick a unit, a hex. I remove all morale hit markers in that hex with no minimum distance from the enemy. And then I can move those units up to 2 movement points and engage the enemy. If fired upon with disengagement fire, I have cohesion rating increased by 1. So this is going to give me a powerful ability to kind of reposition some units. I'm not quite sure where to choose. The 2 movement points doesn't let me get in. I'm too densely packed here, and this is where I think it's most useful. So I think I'm just going to use it to rally this poor unit. Of course, I might rally the better unit, since I failed to do so, and let that unit kind of suffer a possible break there. Nice successful, well, semi-successful rebel yell usages. Branch punched Prince away down here, and over here Ronald and Garnett. Now this was kind of weird because the Confederates took the big hit on Garnett in the incoming phase, but this tiny unit drove this bigger unit out of the way. It's actually not that hard. The thing is, if you don't do defensive fire against a unit, it's got a fair chance of dislodging you. A small force of men can push a much larger force out of the way. And I'm not really bothered by this, because in order to do this, you need to send, attacks from multiple hexes. Or, and here's where it's iffy, a big stack of little units, or a stack of a couple little units, because chances are, again, you're only going to knock the lead unit out of the way. The others still get to attack, though. I guess you apply a new lead unit, but we took both victory point hexes. We drove the cav back here. We took a lot of damage in doing it, though. But that's going to take all the victory points away from the Union for this turn. So they're stuck where they are. And where they are isn't very good compared to the permanent victory point hexes. In fact, in some ways, Dr. Slaughter's house
may be sort of a necessity. The Union may want to swing its force over there now that it's facing such a heavy commitment of Confederates kind of pushing in this direction. And Trimble and Forno are back in the game. We might as well go for the high victory point hex, which is over there. We got one more activation of sorts left. The Union's got a firefight. I'm not sure what they're going to do with that. The only place I think they have to do it with an adjacent unit. No, they can do it at range 2 if they like, which isn't very bad because the rifles are half fire at range 2. But any fire coming out of here might not be terribly good. I actually did it out of here. It didn't have any effect, but then I realized, oh crap, I got Archer up here, so I got to put him into play. I'm going to make a roll for a hill activation, which will succeed. This may not be what would have happened, but we're going to bring some additional troops up. It looks like Early's pretty weak here, so I'm going to try to throw Archer towards the center of the Union line. And there we have his kind of final position streaming in towards to take up a strong point there. That'll allow Thomas and Branch to cover here. Then I can try to recover Early and maybe bring him around for a big flanking move. I got to worry about this flank though. This is where the victory points are right now, which is why bringing Archer up here takes some pressure off Talafiero maybe and allows him to swing over and keep fighting. This time I remembered to put Pender down on the chart, otherwise, like Archer, I probably will just forget him at the beginning of next turn if I don't put the chit in. And the Confederates chose not to use one of their orders. I do not like, what is it, the quick bar charter? I guess if you really need to cover some ground quickly, it's useful, but it's got a chance of, you know, making a unit battle weary. Reduced side, that doesn't really please me at all. And we got a bunch of troops recovering over here. Okay, so we've moved our way through the artillery phase. Let me just put them back at the chit draw. We picked our chits, etc. Union artillery was actually surprisingly effective. Destroyed one of Branch's units or knocked it out for temporarily. Whatever, wrecked it. Thomas got shot up there, probably illegally, because this guy, when I look at the line of sight again, it looks like it may have cut this. I'm not sure. I'm having trouble, but maybe this gun could have gotten him that didn't, whatever. I don't know. The line of sight is really always tough for me to judge, and in this game, in some ways, it's just so nerfed anyway that I have to make up ideas of like bombarding units that you can't see, which, because there are some legitimate blocks that just are not present here. So then, why can't you bombard other units you can't see? What's going on with that? Okay. The Cav actually pulled away here, trying to get closer to things that are likely to rally, because this flank seems to be producing quite a bit of an attack. Confederates started moving their artillery into positions that they can fire from. They've kind of had some out of position guns that haven't been able to do much of anything. Some of them getting pushed back from other locations. Some of them maybe had legitimate fire, say to here, but now this guy's behind. Actually, I think I can see this somehow. I couldn't see it from here, or no, from here. Who knows? I got no idea. But I could see it from up here somehow, which really disturbed me. But I moved anyway because I am bothered by it. But this would just be all downslope, so there's no problem seeing that, I guess. Let's see what else. So the one thing I have to worry about, because the Confederates are pivoting to do a huge outflank over here, is where does the Union come in? And it's 1,300, which is way back here.
but I could delay it to bring them in at 2400, which is this road hex. So I don't think there's a big threat. I was worried maybe they could come in here or up here somewhere. I don't think there's a big threat on Dr. Slaughter's house, which means that I can continue with this motion. I had some fear that maybe, they could just pop up and grab these huge victory points. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The Confederates do have Pender coming in, which will give me more force to maybe throw early into part of that outflank as well. Turns out to be sort of my favorite gaming pipe. Took a nasty hit from a Q-tip, and, well, it's now a wounded warrior. Most of my pipes are in pretty bad shape. This one was in pretty good shape still. But I had to boil the Q-tip out of it. I used tweezers, all kind of tried to burn it out. Boiling was the only thing that worked. And I would suggest trying anything before boiling it because it, of course, removed the stain finish and left it with some kind of residue that, I don't know, probably soap or something. Yeah, I boiled it with dish detergent. We've had a number of activations here in this turn. So far, Hill had a couple with Branch launching an attack up here, and Thomas, I think it was, failing. The Union, all of Augier's forces. One of the problems is when you throw a chit in the cup and you shake it, well, that chit might just be the easiest to reach one again. I don't know. It seems to happen a lot. There have been other things that have kicked in there, including Jackson losing his turn to the Fortunes of War chit. But Geary launched an assault across the board just through here and successfully knocked 3 hexes out, including some cannons pushed back and everything. Nothing knocked out of the game. If cannons are broken, they're gone for good, but just a lot of territory gain. None of that territory is too terribly important, but there are some victory point hexes here, so if I can grab those, and if I can get these suckers back, I can kind of make up for some of the lost ground that I made over the last turn with the Confederate Ronald here, managing his little sneak, taking all the victory hacks. Nice activations as I try to figure out how to describe the battles in this game. Prince used banks because I was thinking, well, the Confederates don't have a lot of chips available. Well, the Confederates actually had what they wanted, a command confusion, but they didn't play it. That's the perfect thing to play against the commander-in-chief. And Prince ended up throwing, I think it was Branch off this hill here. And meanwhile, Ronald got an activation that he failed, but his firepower was enough to destroy a Crawford unit and knock it into the box. Okay, we wind down here on turn 9, and what we're seeing is not a whole hell of a lot. Pender moved up into place. A little bit of firing going on down here. Rusty Sword moved Branch over into a position where another rebel yell would have been useful. I think the Confederates only drew 1 rebel yell this time, though. Yeah, they had one in the pit. So, point-wise, the Union's getting their 4 points again. And they're just collecting them all. And let's see if they bring Ricketts in. It's getting pretty hard not to. Well, he won't be coming in this time, but I'll put us up there. And I forgot the most important thing. Hill got wounded. His replacement's in. Now, he was the best commander here, probably on either side, really, during the battle. Showed a lot of initiative, but came in kind of late. And his rating was a 5, and now he's been downgraded to 3, which means these forces are going to be a lot less effective. A lot of the game is spent, and this is why I come back and I say, well, not much happened, because I do a lot of pulses and really nothing happens because they fail their command roll or other reasons, because there are options other than attacking, moving broadly and such not. So like Garnett back here actually rallied this unit but in doing so, there was a fatigue counter played against him, and another unit got broken because of it. So, like, he's got a better unit available, but he's kind of gotten out in the wash, and he's going to have to pull units back and swap things in and out consistently. So, in a lot of ways, there's not this continuous press that you see in some of the tactical musket era games, where it just feels like the units, are constantly just fighting. And when you actually keep track of the casualties, as you do in some more detailed systems, you get these ridiculous numbers, because, yes, those numbers apply completely to, accurately represent how many casualties you'd see over the course of a short period of intense fighting. But the problem is, the entire game ends up being made up of intense fighting periods, and that just didn't happen. Units had trouble getting into position, they took breathers, etc., and none of that's reflected in some of the simpler systems. CWB goes a long way towards it, but I still sometimes get casualty values 50%, 70% higher than what's expected. It's not as bad as GBACW. Here, you don't have that kind of specificity, so you just have wrecked units, and that's, easier to do some hand waving about. You don't know how many casualties there actually are involved in that. Artillery is beginning to look a lot more effective right now. For one thing, Confederates have guns, right in the face of the Union units, and then over here we had some. So we're seeing canister from the Confederate side in some cases. But there's also enough of a concentration of Union guns that they were able to pound the guns up here, and, well, they didn't do much against these guys, but it's beginning to feel like artillery actually has an effect on play. And the Cav snuck in back here, still looking for somebody to rally them. It's one of the problems. It feels a little unnatural to go running around looking for a command that will rally them. It just feels like they should be able to withdraw, be a certain distance away, and call a rally on their own turn. Same thing for the guns. If they don't do anything and they're far enough away, they should just be able to rally. So I don't really like the way the morale works for the special artillery and cav units. Feels a little off to me. Things open up with Ronald failing to rally. He really wanted to. And then Forno sweeping across and then using a rebel yell to clear out the unit here. That might not have been a great idea. Rebel yells are pretty damn useful, and we had such odds, we didn't really need the bonus there. But I did want to start clearing things out so Trimble can go up, grab these, stuff like that. And right now the Union position's looking pretty damn questionable. First of all, I don't have the victory point hexes here. Yeah, I'm close to these and I would love to grab them, but doing so means driving myself into a position where I might end up surrounded. And that does not sound good. This system doesn't, have the kind of penalties that most systems would have for being surrounded, but it does still sound like I'd end up with a lot of units getting into the break box just because of converging fire coming from both directions. I'm outnumbered. Sort of each Confederate command that does something can really hurt me with its fire, and also potential that I don't have a retreat, which gets me onto the break boxes too. So I almost feel like the Union wants to start a withdrawal. Withdrawal is dangerous, though. I take fire when I withdraw, remember? And also, this line isn't that much longer than this line, or this line, whatever. But one thing to look at is what the Confederate victory points are, because those things are not all equal. And that's a big deal, and I have to find that somewhere. There we go. So the Pike intersection 1606, which is up here, is worth 10. Hudson's House 2404 is worth 10. These are the valuable ones. The rest are all worth 5. So, you know, even giving these up may not be that big a deal. I'm just looking at the woods has a certain defensive benefit to it. I might at least want to anchor myself on the woods where the attacker has some problems moving through the woods. In quick series of events, let's see. We had, well, one of them was Thomas recovered and he helped some of his artillery out that way. And that was successful, even with the injured hill. But we also had a Union, a fog of war, which caused an uncontrolled advance, which disrupted this unit advancing into here. But then a Jackson's Rusty Sword, I was able to rally it and march it in and do a close combat there. So, you know, Forno's Rebel Yell attack is kind of just pressing further and further through the events, etc. And it's kind of fun to have them follow up on it, you know, in that way. There's nothing that controls that in the game system, but it gives me a kick to do it that way. And it looked like a reasonable attack there. Basically, it was a cool move for the Union because it put them in a cornfield and disrupted them. It was a cool move for the Confederacy, although possibly an attack here would have been equally interesting. But this was a weaker unit, and I'm beginning to cave in that Union force and make it harder and harder for them to get out of there. Snuck another turn here, or a few actions, not turn. Olive Augur, it just got drawn not quite one after another, but together, again because of the Chit Cup. I try shaking it, it doesn't work for me. Same thing just keeps coming up on top regularly for whatever reason. All of the Augur units went. It's not a big deal. Geary, I think, failed to act. Shot away some of the artillery down here. And let's see. Prince didn't get his withdrawal. And finally, Green tried to rally and didn't get that either. Basically, they just failed across the board. And Augur sucks. In between there, Banks came up, which gives me another opportunity maybe to try to get Geary out of there if nothing better shows up. Also within that, the Confederates launched another with a Rebel Yell, charging up here and drove a couple of units back. Actually knocked this one all the way back and this one just to here. Just trying to put the screws into that Union position and try to collapse it into itself. Of course, the units I most want to get moving were too far away, so I'm kind of outrunning my reserves. So far, we're running to the end of the turn. Only Williams is left here. The Confederates have had some actions over here on Winder's side that didn't really get very far. Talafiero was forced with a command confusion into an attack that he didn't want. He wanted to recover. Others maybe didn't get their actions at all. Now what we've got left is really just Jackson. The Union has a reserve movement, Banks, and all of Williams. So we've got a pretty good chance to get our units out of there. We're going to take some fire here. Geary up here. But he actually has the opportunity to go for an attack and try to grab a few more victory points. You know, it's this risk of losing the entire command, but that doesn't look very likely. Whereas pumping these points up a little bit more, holding out a little longer, that's very tempting. I was unable to resist. First of all, Crawford went and took this hex. That's 2 points. And I used Banks to charge Geary into here because this is a 4-point hex. So that's going to be 6 more Union victory points. I'm just chalking up the victory run as much as I can. And let's see. Other than that, we've got to check for rickets. See if we catch any. Oh, it looks like we do. So Ricketts's whole division is going to be able to deploy here, and that's quite a bit. That'll be coming in next turn. We'll put him in the cup, but in addition to that, you got more units. It's really hard to recover your units when they're in the middle of a fight because one, they're probably too close, but you can bring, the reserves, the damaged stuff back on the board as long as you have kind of a front line to fall back from. If you're not being collapsed the way that the Confederates are threatening to do to the Union. Beyond that, anything else? Of course, we got these guys to turn up. We got all of Ricketts' command to bring onto the board. And that's a big force that'll be coming in. But they can't come any closer than this. That's enough to kind of maybe shut down the Confederate advance there. That triggers Hill. It's the last unit there. I don't know when he comes in. Hill's rear guard. Field can speed up at the end of turn phase on the turn in which the first Ricketts shows up. The Confederate player gets to roll, and on a 5 or a 6 we'll get a chance of bringing him in. We're going to put him here to remind us. Or maybe we'll just put him up here to remind us. And otherwise we'll be going through the beginning of turn phases, cutting up here on turn 11. The battle's almost over, and the Confederates haven't really started to sweep the Union too heavily from the board. And with Ricketts coming on, it's going to be rough. It's going to be hard to gain much beyond maybe a couple of these victory point hexes. So I think the Union may have this one pretty well in hand. We're going to load this video up. We only have 4 more turns. That should fit on a video pretty easily. So sorry about the slow going. My wife is completely addicted to Dominion, and I'm enjoying being able to do something with her.